HRP.
At the front desk. So in the hallway.
You're kind of on the agenda already, sir. So you'll be set up to speak.
Okay, so I don't
During the
need
public
to,
hearing process.
I don't need to then.
No, you're in the, okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Thanks for thinking of me.
Mr. Mayor, that's Bill Noble, and Bill is
Bill.
the applicant for the apartments.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And Mr. Mayor, that is Mike Morgan right there. Mike is working with Bill as his tenant.
Okay. Great. All right. So the December 7th, 2022 City Council meeting is now called to order. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. After the election in May, we have received the results. They have been certified. And we have two new, well, we have one returning council and a new councilor to swear in for the oath of office. I can do, Mr. Preston will go in there and then Dana just afterwards.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So Preston. Take this in chunks for you, sir.
You want me to be there? Or
No, right here, it'd be fine. All right, so if you'd raise your right hand for me. I, Preston Devereaux,
I, Preston Devereaux,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America
that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America
and the Constitution and laws
and the Constitution and laws
of the State of Oregon
of the State of Oregon
and the Charter,
and the Charter,
ordinances, and rules
ordinances, and rules
of procedures
of procedure
for the City of Deerheart,
for the City of Deerheart.
and that I will faithfully and honorably
And I will faithfully and honorably
conduct myself in position 3
conduct myself in position 3
for the City of Deerheart,
for the City of Deerheart,
to which I have been elected to the best of my ability.
to which I have been elected to the best of my ability.
There's right over there for you. Congratulations. So, thank you. So, I, Dana Gold,
I, Dana Gould,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America
that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America
and the Constitution and laws of the State of Oregon
and the Constitution and laws of the State of Oregon
and the Charter, ordinances, and rules of procedures
and the Charter,
They're swearing in now.
rules and procedures
for the City of Deerheart,
of the City of Deerheart,
and that I will faithfully and honorably
and that I will faithfully and honorably
conduct myself in position 1
conduct myself in position 1
for the City of Deerheart,
for the City of Deerheart,
to which I have been elected to the best of my ability.
to which I have been elected to the best of my ability.
All right, thank you.
Okay. The December 7th, 2022 public hearing on zone code, zone change amendment. It's hereby open. I'm going to read the hearing disclosure statement. The mayor or planning commission chairman shall read the following statement at the beginning of any public hearing for land use application or a comprehensive plan or zoning code amendment. All persons testifying shall be deemed parties to the application and must provide their name, full mailing address if they wish to be notified of the decision, continuances, appeals, or other procedural actions required by the code. The city zoning code specifies applicable criteria to be relied upon in making a decision. These criteria and findings of fact are in the city staff report. Public testimony should be limited to those criteria and findings of fact or to other city or state land use standards that the person testifying believes apply to the proposed land use action. Failing to raise an issue in person or in writing with sufficient detail to afford the hearing body and parties to the hearing an opportunity to respond to that issue precludes appeal to the city council or the land use board of appeals, or to seek damages in circuit court due to a condition of approval. Before the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, any participant may ask the planning commission for an opportunity to present additional relevant evidence, arguments, or testimony that is within the scope of the hearing. The hearings body shall grant the request by scheduling a date to finish the hearing, a continuance to a time and date certain, or by leaving the record open for additional evidence, argument, or testimony pursuant to ORS 197.763 6A through E. Does anyone need to declare a conflict of interest, ex parte contact, or personal bias?
Nope.
Do you need to declare any?
I've been to the site.
Oh, that's okay. I'm just looking for any kind of conflict of interest or ex parte comment.
No. Thank you.
Are there any challenges in the audience to the council's ability to make an impartial decision? Chad, do you want to do the staff report?
Yes, my pleasure, Mayor. And I'm going to stand in here. Ms. Carol Connell, after 50 years as a planner, had retired last month. We're currently working towards finding her replacement, but in the meantime, I'm going to handle the staff report for tonight. So I'll do my best to keep it brief. And if I do run into any issues, I've got Ms. Angelina here that'll help me out through it. And we just also happen to have our current planning commissioner president, Ms. Virginia Digging, with us as well. So the zone change amendment, the planning commission received an application for approval of a zone map amendment from low density residential R1 to high density residential R3 to protect an existing non-conforming apartment units and permit construction of additional multi-family housing units in the future. Location is on Pine Ridge Drive, and a public hearing and the meeting was conducted last month at the planning commission. Miss Carol updated her report after that meeting with recommendations from the planning commission. A couple things of note just to kind of get you caught up, and I think most of you have probably gone over this, so I won't spend too much time. But there is, the property owner is Paul Falvey and Bill Noble, and Bill is here with us tonight. The applicant is Mike Morgan, a consultant planner, and he is also here this evening. The location for this site is address is 1777 Pine Ridge Drive and 1837 Pine Ridge Drive. There's two buildings. It's located west of Highway 101, adjoining Pine Ridge Drive at the intersection of Deerheart Lane. The city staff on page 4 made some comments prior to that meeting. There was a site analysis done where we took a look at the site and made some notes. The standards and the GZO section R1 zone code is on page 5. And I want to spend a little bit of time on page 5, number C, to talk about the R1 zone. And just read this from Carol's report. It says the applicant indicates the existing multifamily dwellings were built before zoning was established in Deer Heart. Yes, that's true. And then also at the time that the zoning was established, this particular set of apartments were not in the city of Deer Heart as well. The existing apartments are therefore a non-conforming use per Deer Heart zoning code, Article 10, non-conforming uses. It so happens that if more than 40% of that complex is destroyed by fire or other disaster, the existing apartments may not be reconstructed except in conformity with the R1 low density residential zone, which does not permit multifamily housing. R1 zone is single family dwelling, 10,000 square foot minimum. A small fire on the site occurred last year and the damage had been repaired. However, since then, the owners have become aware of the non-conforming status and implications. And again, to protect their investment, they request the property be rezoned to R3 high density residential to legitimize the existing dwellings. And to meet the demand for apartments, they also hope to build an estimated 8 more units in the future, as can be accommodated on the site. And of course, all future construction would require building permits, but no major planning review. So the R3 zone, high density residential zone, the purpose of the R3 zone is to provide for a high density multifamily with a maximum density of 16 dwelling units per acre. The zone also provides space for orderly development and expansion of overnight accommodations and related businesses such as gift shops. Other uses as churches, parks, governmental buildings, and utilities may be allowed as a conditional use in this zone, again, as a conditional use. The zone states that conversion to resort uses should be provided with a minimum of disruption of existing residential values, which would be a criteria that we would need to meet in the conditional use process if there was to be any other such business. So there are findings that were attached, page 5 and page 6, go more into the transportation improvements. On page 6, there is a mention, well, the second paragraph. In the R3 zone, and this property is approximately 3.07 acres, it permits a net density of about 16 dwelling units per acre, which would mean 42 dwelling units allowed on the site. 42 dwelling units each generate 4.48 total trips in an 8-hour day, or 188 trips in regards to traffic. The other factor in this is the GZO tsunami hazard overlay zone that the city of Deer Heart put into place. It limits dense housing development to a density increase of no more than 10 units per acre. In this case, the density would allow the 3.07 gross acres times 10 per acre equals 30 total dwelling units at a maximum permitted by the tsunami overlay zone. 30 dwelling units would generate about 4.48 total trips per unit in an 8-hour day, or 134 trips per day at its maximum. Therefore, in either case, based on completely redeveloped site and a maximum density, the number of trips does not exceed 300 trips threshold standard that required a full traffic impact analysis. Page 6 and 7 further go on as to the type of local street designs that are coming out of the transportation systems plan that we have. In that, it indicates that your Heart Loop is set up for the future of a shared use path for both bicycles and pedestrians. That would include a 2-foot gravel shoulder on either side of it, next to the roadways. There is provisions in here that says the city manager may waive the improvement requirements for the adjoining Deer Heart Lane frontage, or may require a fee in lieu of 100% of the estimated cost. Or, and this is important, they require a waiver of remonstrance to assure improvements can be made in the future. And as you'll see in the recommendations, that's the path that we're heading for. There are some wetlands near this piece of property, just to the east of it. It doesn't seem to be in the area where the construction would be happening, but there has been by Roger Bogar Environmental Investigations, a wetland delineation that was done. And we have that, I believe. Yes, thank you, sir. So let's see. So that is also a consideration that we need to take into account. The approval criteria for this is that a zone map amendment decision must be based on adequate findings, demonstrating compliance with each of the following zone map amendments. The amendment shall be consistent with the comp plan, the comprehensive plan. The amendment will meet the land use need. The uses permitted by the amendment are compatible with land use development patterns in the vicinity of the request. I'm on page 8, top. The land is physically suitable for the uses to be allowed in terms of slope, soil, flood hazards, and other relevant considerations. And the public facilities and services, including transportation systems and access, are available to accommodate these uses. Those criteria are listed out with the findings below. I'm going to move all the way to page 15 and give you the summary and recommendation. The summary of issues: the R3 zone allows a maximum of 42 units, while the tsunami hazard zone restricts density to 30 dwellings. The commission chose a more restricted density, that's the planning commission. The R3 zone permits tourist accommodations subject to planning commission approval of a conditional use permit if requested in the future. The commission chose to prohibit tourist accommodations as a condition of the zone change. The transportation system plan requires Gearhart Lane shared use path to be built on the street frontage at time of new construction. And the commission chose to defer the required street improvements. The city manager may waive the requirement, like a fee in lieu, but or require the other side waiver of remonstrance. So we have the TSP projects adjoining the site. We'll address the transportation policies below, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And to finish, there's the approval criteria on those 5 issues. And on the bottom of page 15 is a summary. The commission chose the more restrictive density of the tsunami hazard overlay zone. To restrict the density to 30 dwellings rather than the 42. The R3 zone permits tourist accommodations subject to planning commission approval of a conditional use permit requested in the future. The commission chose to prohibit that. The transportation system plan requires the frontage. The commission chose to defer the street requirements. And then we would use the waiver of remonstrance for that. Thank you. I'm skipping over. Additionally, when the owner decides to construct the additional units in the future, an updated wetland delineation may be required. DEQ Placer County Health approval is required for new construction to assure there is adequate septic capacity for the site. So based on the zone change approval requirement, the Planning Commission decided to recommend the City Council to approve the zone map amendment from residential R1 to R3, subject to the following conditions. Number 1, maximum site density shall not exceed 30 dwelling units, recommended as a deed restriction. Number 2, the tourist accommodations or short-term rentals are prohibited, recommended as a deed restriction. Number 3, the commission decided that rather than require construction of the TSP and park plan improvement project for Gearhart Lane, which is the shared bicycle pedestrian evacuation project on the site's said frontage, the owner shall record a waiver of remonstrance on property title requiring property owner participation in a local improvement district to make said improvements, as described as project number G11 in the transportation systems plan. And number 4, prior to construction of any new unit, it is recommended that the 2 existing parcels be consolidated. So you have your options on the bottom of page 16. Council may choose the following motions to continue the hearing to the next meeting, but do note that the final decision is due on February 4th, 23, unless extended by the applicant. Second option is to move or deny the zone map amendment based on the identification of new findings to support that denial. And so that would be important. Findings to support if you did come up with any. Or number 3, move to approve the zone map amendment subject to the recommendations and conditions of approval and direct staff to prepare an ordinance for adoption at the next city council meeting. And at that, unless there's any quick questions, that is a summary of the report.
Okay. Now we move on to the applicant's report.
And Mr. Morgan, just before you start, I also want to point out there's one letter that was received by Polina Cochran from Polina after the packets went out, and there's one other letter that's attached to the packets. Ms. Christie sent you the document that was sent by Ms. Polina Cochran, so hopefully you have a chance to be able to read that.
I had a chance to see it.
I want to see it so they can address it.
So my name is Mike Morgan, PO Box 132, Cannon Beach. I'm a consulting planner and have been working with Carol for many years, actually. I'm representing Bill Noble, who's sitting here and would like to add a few words after I do. But we're certainly in agreement with the 4 recommendations that the Planning Commission set down. The site density not exceeding 30 dwelling units, tourist accommodation being prohibited via a deed restriction, the TSP waiver remonstrance, and the combination of the 2 parcels. This is really an issue of fairness and equity because, as the city manager pointed out, this was in the county, and for some reason it was zone R1 even though it was built in 71 and 73, 2 separate. There are actually three buildings. It was all these years it's been non-conforming use, and Gerhardt's code is a little unusual compared to some of the other cities. The fact that if you have a fire that destroys 40% of your building, you have to conform after that. So most cities say 80%, which means a pretty a disaster of some sort. So I think it's very important to Mr. Noble and Falvey that they become conforming so that if there is a fire that they could not have to just do single family R1 units there. Basically the idea of having up to 30 units is amenable to Mr. Noble because there are currently 15 units. If you looked at the site, the ones on Pine Ridge are quite up to date. The ones along Gerhardt Loop Road were built first, and they're pretty out of date, and eventually will probably be replaced. And so the 30 units would allow him to add up to another 30, up to 15 more units on the site, which is pretty low density for R3. The code allows for 16, but because of the tsunami hazard, you're limiting it to 10. So that's basically our point of view, and I'm glad to answer any questions.
Any questions? Thank you, Mike.
Okay, thank you. Bill, do you want to have?
Bill, if you can give us your name and address, please, mailing address.
William Noble, 577 14th Street, Astoria, Oregon.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, my intentions are to improve the property. It's like he said, it was built in the 70s. It doesn't meet the fire requirements that are due these days and stuff. And I was very fortunate a year ago that I didn't lose any lives and that the whole building didn't burn down. Thank you for the Gerhart Fire Department and Seaside Fire Department. My goals are to complete the 30 units at a time to where I can leave them to my family, my son and my grandkids. So it's kind of a legacy thing. I have no intentions of building short-term rentals or anything like that. I also am able to keep my rents down so it's affordable housing because I have people from your fire department living there, your post office lady, Karen. So it makes an affordable place for, people that have to be here to do service jobs. So anyway, that's my intentions. Is there any questions?
Apparently not. Thank you, Mike.
Bill.
Bill, I'm sorry. So I got. Okay, at this time, I'm going to ask for any proponents. You can raise your hand and I'll call on you. Seeing none. Are there any opponents who'd like to speak? Seeing none, I'll move on to neutral comments. Seeing none, I'll go and say applicants, you don't have a rebuttal to nothing, so we'll move on.
Did you want to ask them about to address Paulina's letter, giving us a chance to read it? Because she brings up an interesting point.
Well, I can do that.
I can respond. I don't think that Mr. Noble doesn't have any intention of doing, cocktail lounges or gift shops or any other businesses. He's in the business of providing needed and affordable housing. So, I don't think he'd object to say a deed restriction that would prohibit cocktail lounges, but I don't think it's realistic, and I don't think it's necessary. So that's all I have to say.
Okay. Were you given the letter from Karen Johnson?
I just saw Paulina's.
Karen Johnson's was impacted as well.
The season of reading.
We'd like to keep track of some
Gotcha.
questions.
I will need that back. I'll make you copies.
Well, I think that the bottleneck at the entry to the property is going to be alleviated when he builds the additional units. He'd like to build 2 fourplexes initially, and it's a split driveway in and out, if you notice, and that can be improved substantially. I think it would be cost prohibitive parking structure. I mean, if you noticed in the staff report, the rents are from $875 to $1,200, which is extremely affordable for the county as a whole. And so I think that would be kind of a deal killer to require, a parking garage or covered parking. So that's my response.
Thank you.
Can I get that back? I'll make sure you get a copy of it.
Oh, sure.
Are there any questions from the council? Okay,
For this gentleman, or,
in general,
yes, I have some questions in general.
okay. Peter, are we going to go to questions, or do we do that during discussion at the end of the meeting when we have?
So you can have the questions now for both the applicant and staff.
Okay. Thank you. Dan?
I don't have to go first, but if you'd like me to.
No.
Okay. All right, because I'm new to this, I may have some questions that seem kind of silly to everybody else, but I assume if I have them, that maybe somebody else has the same. The discussion, so when I look up the zoning on this to compare, the zoning always talks about a lot, and yet I noticed that in this request, we're talking about actually 2 tax lots. But we're doing our calculations and we're considering them as if they're one. Is that going to be an issue for us?
When and if there would be a permit required or a hold for this, we would require that the 2 tax lots be combined.
So we would require that.
Yes.
Okay, because that was my first question was, if we do this, then could these be divided up and sold as, two separate lots, both at R3, which might create a problem. Okay, then the next thing, first of all, let me say that I love this project and I like you a lot. And I like what you're doing a lot.
You don't even know me.
Well, but I do. I'm looking at this and I'm looking at the rents that you're charging and how long the people that have stayed there. That tells me that you're doing well. And I like you and I want you to stay in Deerheart. So I want to find a way for this to work, but that's Dana Gould, the citizen. Councilor Gould has to follow the comprehensive plan, and the comprehensive plan really is very limiting as far as we can change zoning, and it has to be very specific. And what it says, one of the reasons giving that we should support this, and which I agree with, is that we need affordable housing. And you have been voluntarily providing what appears to be very affordable housing. And I really like you and I want you to live forever.
Thank you.
But I don't think any of us are gonna get out of this alive. Eventually, something's gonna happen. So when the property goes on to somebody else.
My son.
Right, or when you improve these, I imagine it's gonna be a little bit more costly to run them, or it's gonna cost you some money to run them. I expect rents may have to go up. So I think it's in our best interest to somehow consider, or somebody needs to figure out the affordability factor. As far as the fairness and the equity issue, I absolutely believe that we need to address that. We need to bring this, make it right by you, that you could rebuild at least your existing. And maybe I'm misunderstanding, but I'm thinking R2 gets you there, R3 takes you above and beyond and makes the property a little bit more valuable. Is that, and allows you to build more?
Yeah, the problem is, you don't have sewer here. So
Right.
to get 30 units on that piece of property would be really tight. You don't have enough setbacks, you don't have enough distance between septic tanks or, septic systems. So it would be crowding it. And I don't want to overcrowd the property, but I would like to get as many units on there as I can, because I don't know if the 2 units that are on Deerheart Loop, they're built in the 70s, and they are basically, I don't know how to say this properly, but they're very inexpensively built.
Right,
And they need to be rebuilt. So I need to, what I would really like to do is build one new building, move some of my tenants into it, tear one down, build another building with the tenants that I have into the next new building, and then, you know, be somewhere between 24 and 30 units. But I want to keep my rents low, and if I do it in that fashion, I can do this.
right,
And we've had the property for, I don't know, 20 years, 20 some years, and some of my tenants I've had for 20 years.
right.
And,
Well, and
Yeah.
and again, that's great, and I hope you live forever,
well,
but we have to make a zoning change based on knowing indeed that goal is going to be met.
correct, and that, isn't that where we put that on the deed, when we record the deed, the zone change?
Well, we'll get to that, but yeah, I'm asking questions because I'm probably learning along with you.
I am learning.
Yeah, I can answer part of that question for
Okay.
you. I don't believe the R2
Okay.
There you are.
Okay.
would not give the project enough density to do even what he's thinking about doing.
Right.
In regards to that, so a triplex or fourplex, two-family dwelling or duplex.
But would it get him to 15? If his existing structures burned down, he would be able to rebuild to 15?
In the R2 zone, so let's say we left it as two pieces of property. You can have a two-family dwelling or duplex. You can have a triplex or fourplex. One. So that has already been exceeded as it currently sits.
Okay, so that answers that question. Okay,
Still be non-conforming.
as it exists, so that would not bring him up to the fairness and equity issue. But we're still talking about an R3. Now, Paulina brought up the issue of, all of the things that go along with R3, which he's willing to address there, which I think is great. But I still think that as far as being able to say the affordability, I don't know that the comprehensive plan intends us to do a zone change based on the circumstances right now, but I think they want us to look to the future, what could happen in the future. I think they want us to guarantee, at least for a reasonable amount of time, there should be some kind of guarantee that there will be affordable housing in there. And affordable housing is defined by HUD. And that's a whole nother thing that I need to be educated on, but I know enough to know that when the goal is talking about having affordable housing, they're not just talking about, through the zone change, they're talking about in the at least near future and a little bit beyond that.
I can address some of these issues, Mayor, if you would like.
Would you?
Yeah, so the term affordable housing is a defined term relating to a certain type of housing. And if you look at the Oregon's land use goals, which are statewide land use goals, goal 10 is a variety of housing. One of those things being housing affordability. So although it doesn't seem like there would be a difference between most people use the term affordable housing, and what they're really saying is housing affordability. And so what that is under goal 10, cities look to providing housing for people with a variety of incomes. So although our comp plan says affordable housing, these units are what I would term naturally occurring affordable housing. So they weren't built as a HUD project. They didn't receive the sort of federal funding, grants, other things that HUD affordable housing would get. What happened is they were built and then they started aging. And as they aged, they became, well, maybe not more affordable because, but as compared to new construction, more affordable. Because if you're looking at a brand new complex or a 50-year-old complex that hasn't been recently rehabilitated to kind of new standards, then the 50-year-old product is probably going to be more affordable, which is why a lot of economists will say today's market rate housing is tomorrow's affordable housing. And really what they mean is less expensive. They don't mean the HUD term for affordable housing. What I would say, if we're again looking at goal 10 and we're looking at the Northern Oregon coast, there is a severe shortage of workforce housing and not a lot of opportunities to build more in Gerhardt or other places under our current urban growth boundary. So as we look at this sort of project and what it could become, I think a lot of people would say, well, why would this be zoned R1 when it was developed as a multifamily units? And the reason is because when you're annexing property from the county to a city, generally the land use, traditionally how this is done is the city land use designation that you do is that's closest to whatever the county's land use designation was. And because these apartments were built around the time that our land use laws were put into place, there weren't those sort of zoning designations within the county necessarily, so you could really build what you wanted, which is how this got built. And then they weren't really looking at the use as far as units. They were looking at larger maps and designations. So this is how something that was built in unincorporated Clatsop County could be brought into the city as R1. And again, this is not unique to this property. As I look at our zoning map, they're not a small number of properties that it kind of seems like they're in the wrong zone, but they were pre-existing non-conforming use. And so we do not have an apparatus under our code or the sort of grants currently that would allow us to impose a rent cap on the applicant. Though certainly we would hope that they would continue to rent these spaces at an affordable rate. And in the future, if they were to build, you know, we would hope that they would continue to do that. That's what they've indicated. The reality is that when people do new construction and add units, and I say this as someone who's represented a lot of cities that have had UGB expansions or gone through growth, but also someone who not that many years ago, you know, a majority of my practice was really private side land use, that the builder of those units is going to need to be able to recoup the cost of building them. Unless we are able to get state grants or federal grants through HUD or someone else for development this size, state grants far more likely than HUD. But unless we're able to get those funds so that we can participate in the development, we're not going to be able to get an exaction of a max rental. It would not be us asking for that exaction would not probably pass what are called the Nolan test and the Dolan test, which Nolan being your exaction has to be roughly has to have a nexus and Dolan roughly proportionate to the benefit received. We would have some trouble with that exaction under an R3. If the applicant in the future, when they decide to build, if they're interested in one of those programs, we could certainly work with the state to see if those funds would be available. And that's kind of how we could help participate in that and guarantee an outcome.
No, that was just my question. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't setting ourselves up for in the future, you know, something like this.
Yeah, no,
happens,
it's
we don't set a precedent that we
very
can't.
valid question. And a lot of times it's when we talk about affordable housing, it gets very confusing because there is that federal definition and then there's how it's defined by the state. And that's how it's addressed by localities like us, when really what we meant wasn't like Section 9 housing. What we meant was housing affordability.
Okay.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Peter. And then I think my one other real question was about the fence. It's in the report that you and the fire department determined that the fence on the south side would be removed.
Actually, what I want to do is I want to put certain access areas through there, non-locked for like a chain, and they just take it down. My septic systems are there. I don't want them driving across the septic systems and then having the fire truck stuck and, you know, me having to rebuild my septic systems.
Right.
So we'll designate ways in, and then I want to do that another hydrant and stuff. And, you know, I want to bring the property up to code is what I want to do.
Right.
You know, because it scared me to death last year. I could have lost some people.
Yeah.
And it was all because of negligence of a tenant.
Right.
And I don't know if you know this, the week before the fire happened, I was there checking my property out and she had a barbecue on the upper deck and I walked up to her door and said, you gotta remove the barbecue and get her off your deck. It's not allowed, it's in your lease, it says that right in your lease. Oh, exactly a week later, Sunday morning, she had left it on all night, it was up against the building and it has 5x6 cedar bevel siding, perfect kindling. So it just went up and then there was no separation firewalls between the units. So it could have got away from us, thank God to the fire department, and raced down that whole building and gone so fast. A building like that would probably be up and gone in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, and if somebody's sleeping or elderly, I have a lot of elderly people there too. You know, they might have got hurt. So, you know, a person thinks about a lot of things. And like I say, you brought up a thing, I learned something a long time ago. I've been dealing with rentals since the 70s. My aunt and uncle owned over 100 rentals in Portland. I helped them. I have a theory. I shop the area for what rentals go for, and I stay well below the margin of the rents because a tenant will not be late on their rent and they cannot find a place more reasonable. So they're very prompt on paying their rent to keep from being evicted. And all through COVID, I never had one tenant not pay their rent. So as long as I have them, I can guarantee you that's how we, you know, ran. Same with my son.
Right.
You know, he's young. Hopefully he'll keep them for 20 years, you know.
Well, and I appreciate that. You understand, I just have to ask the questions.
No,
Yeah.
I want you to.
And so far you're answering the right way, but the reason I was asking about the fence and the reason that the fire department wants you to remove the fence is so that they can get access there. But then we're also not going to start working on the pedestrian crossing or the pedestrian walkway there, which means then now the parking that's going up and down Pine Ridge may flow out onto Gerhart Loop. So I'm wondering, what do we do in order to make sure that that does not happen and that remains open? Do we create a fire lane there, put up our no parking signs? What do we do to create or keep from creating a bigger mess?
In regards to the fire side of things, we have a design review process that we go through, and each department here at the city goes through that. Fire is a major part of that. So until we know the makeup and everything, will Josh be able to put, Chief Josh be able to put requirements on them? But there will be requirements, there will be access requirements, and however we figure out to do that between Bill and the fire chief, it'll be to the satisfaction of the fire chief.
Okay, just you get that? My major concern though is cars parking along Gerhart Lane up and down the lane, the ones that are, you know, because there are a significant number of cars parked down the street.
There's also a process for that. So when
Okay.
it comes in for review, we have to go by state code and we have to go by the Gerhart zoning ordinance, which requires 2 parking spaces per dwelling.
Right.
So they would have to abide by not only that, they would also have to abide by building code stating how many handicaps they have to have for so many parking spaces, and these are off-street parking.
So the question you asked is parking on Gerhart Loop, right?
Right,
There shouldn't be any parking allowed there at all.
right. Well, that's what I'm getting at also. I
Yeah,
agree with
I would like that.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's what I'm saying is if we don't do the pedestrian walkway and you take away that fence, human nature is that you take the shortest route, so they're going to,
Human
you know,
nature is my tenants will be driving across my lawn.
yeah,
And that's why I want all.
Your septic fields.
What's that?
Your septic fields.
yeah, yeah.
That is correct.
So if we can
That's
prevent
that's
parking down there, it's a
acceptable.
win-win is what you're saying.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Which has not been addressed in any of these recommendations. There, other than the parking and having the off-street parking available, but we can't prevent people from legally parking on the street. I'm not sure with the development of this property and what Chief Josh's requirements are going to be as far as on Pine Ridge Drive, if once they do this and add more occupancy, if the fire department is going to need that area or not, I'm not sure. So currently, there could be parking on Pine Ridge Drive.
Okay.
They would have to do some off-street parking on Deer Heart Loop, which would include the lawn being developed on that side. But in regards to the letters that we received, the concern is the access point. That being on Pine Ridge Drive, the way that it's split now seems to be the major point of these two letters. The only other option is to either improve that situation somehow, or to add an access on your Heart Loop. And that has discussed.
So that's my point, is that we're saying, no, you don't have to do that now, but yet we're creating a possibility where we could end up with cars out there.
Well, you don't have to do the upgrades that provides the shared path as identified in the transportation systems plan. But I think there can be a requirement that there be potentially a change in access depending on how it would work in that piece of property. I'm not sure it's possible, being that the septic systems are there. I did drive that site and took a look at what, the safety aspect of that, having an access on Gerhard Loop. And it wouldn't be really any different than Pine Ridge Drive and Pfeiffer. It would just add more in egress and ingress to that site. But I didn't see any major safety issues if there were to be an access point on Gerhard.
Yeah, and I don't have an issue with the access on Deerheart Loop. The one guy who has a party at Christmas time and has 30 people show up and they park out on, the lane, and now they're running across because that's the fastest way to get to the apartment is across his field. And that is just my issue. So,
No more questions?
not for me.
At this time, I'm going to close the hearing. I'm going to go to the regular city council meeting. Is there a declaration of conflict of interest from any of the councilors? Having here none, I go to approval of minutes. A motion and a second for Wednesday, November 2nd meeting.
I move we approve the regular meeting of the city council on Wednesday, November 2nd, 2022.
Okay, motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we've got 4 yeas and 1 abstain. Preston, since you weren't there, you can't vote on it.
It's okay, I did the same thing the other week too.
Don't think I yell. Can we have a motion for Tuesday, November 29th work session?
I'll give you a motion, but I have a correction.
Discussion for correction?
So when we were talking about, on page 4, top first paragraph, it's a little misleading about our discussion about the leak detection. And I believe my recollection is that Mr. McFadden said that due to the pipes being in the sand, that it would be ineffective and inaccurate. And I think that this is just a little bit not quite clear as to that, because it makes it look like we said, yeah, we'll do this. It'll be no problem to me.
Okay, so
Yeah, he said listening devices were placed on pipes in the cities, but because that we are in sand, they weren't amenable to that.
It was going to be ineffective. So I would move that we add a line saying that he did say that there would be issues with it, that they may not be as effective as we would like.
so this is questionable and sand is not good. If you wanna,
It doesn't.
Yeah, where he was saying in the sand, it
Yes.
makes it difficult
Right.
to really hear where the leak is occurring.
hey, that's what you want. Motion with correction,
Motion,
With
correction.
second, please.
I'll second that.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Aye. All right, moving on. You have the planning commission report. Any questions? No questions? Mayor's report. November 29th, I walked the dunes with Councilor Tomlinson, City Administrator Sweet. And is it Richard from Young's Bay or Robert?
Robert.
Robert from Young's Bay Trees, and we talked about a multi-year mowing schedule for the Scotch broom, so we can get a handle on that, so it's not growing 6 feet over a year's time. And we talked about the pruning of trees out in the dunes. And hopefully, in a work session, we can come up with a plan that is amenable to all councilors, and we can go ahead and move in that. Because I'd like to see that done this spring and then this fall, and do it twice a year. But this is something that took that long because it's, I couldn't walk that far. And now I can. I attended a scheduled 10-hour LOC elected essentials meeting. Would you mute yourself, please?
Got it. It was the Chiefs radio.
Okay. That was on Wednesday, the 30th. That was a very long day. On December 4th, I had a meeting with Lindsay Huddleston and other members of the council on a state revenue sharing letter. On December 4th, I attended a conference in Albany with the Oregon Mayors Association that went on until 8:30. That's all I got for a report. City officers report. You have
With the council report, sir.
council's report comes next. You're absolutely right. I just skipped on. Anyway, Dana, you go first.
Oh, you're gonna start with me? I've been talking all night.
I know.
Okay, so last month, in addition to the Essentials Workshop, I saw a lot of LOC. I went to the League of Oregon Cities Homelessness Workshop near Lincoln City, and that was a pretty cool gig. I paid for my own way, but I got a lot out of it. I got a great view. But I also learned a lot, and down there, I also learned about a budget proposal that the League of Oregon Cities is doing with the Oregon Mayors Association. And they wanted the support of all of the cities, that all 241 cities, I think it was, in Oregon on this, because they intend to go during the 2023 legislative session for a pretty cool budget package, which provides direct allocation to cities for homelessness response and prevention services. So depending on who you talk to around here, we don't have a huge problem with homelessness, but I think that if you talk to the right people, you'll find out that it's growing. But what really interested me was that the prevention services, And that this is an opportunity for us to get money, and we can use the money for a variety of things. We decide whether we want to put it towards food bank assistance, affordable housing, shelter, outreach workers, other prevention services. We're talking something to the tune of about $76,000. And the proposal provides the cities with the ability to redirect the funds. So let's say we get the money, we could redirect it to community partners who are then required to use the funds for homelessness response and prevention services. So all we have to do is say, yes, we will support you in all of the other cities. And as far as I can tell, all of the other cities in the community, the Warrenton mayor is called us since that meeting and asked us, are you interested? And we said, money involved, yeah, probably interested. So we tentatively told them that we would, but of course it takes a decision from all of us. Do we want to accept money? And then what would we want to do with the money? So I think we should talk about that in our meeting next week, about where we would like that to go. Now, it's separate along that line. There's a separate proposal that runs parallel to that, and that's a budget package that provides for capital improvement funding for the cities. And this one is a little more, this one is the one where we really have to put our heads together and say, if we accepted capital improvement money, what are all the requirements that go along with that? Because that then creates a project that we then have to manage. We have to very quickly come up with not a hard number, but a soft number on what we think it would cost. But more importantly, what is it that we want? I mean, would we want, theoretically, we could use the money to put bathrooms into a park, or water fountains, or storage for folks, so that homelessness is coming our way. And the thing is that under new case law, you can't just ask the folks to leave public parks or whatever if you don't have shelters in your city. We don't have any shelters in our city. So working with these partnerships in the region, it's going to be important to us, but also perhaps we could create some kind of a place where they could store the property that belongs to them that we don't want out on the sidewalk all the time. And we could, or, I mean, there's a variety of different things. We don't have to decide tonight, but that's something we should start thinking about. And we should probably talk about it in the near future. And I think that is it. I'm going to try very hard to be quiet for the rest of the evening, so to say.
Rita,
I have nothing.
awesome.
I too attended the walks with news with Mayor Carey and Administrator Sweet, and yeah, it was a good conversation. It was very cold and wet,
Who was that?
so
Preston, even though it's.
I'm new here. I have nothing to say.
Okay, well, good. Then we'll move on to city officers' reports. We have the police chief's report in our packet. I am not sure, but is Hutch not going to be here, or Josh?
Josh is going to be here. I believe he is ready to go. There might be a fight. He may be late.
Amy?
Yeah, there is a current fire call that they're working on. So we'll see if he's here. He might be online, so we'll give him a shot.
Okay. Then we'll go to city treasurer. Justine.
City treasurer.
So in revenues, property tax saw the most significant increase, which impacts the general fund, the debt service fund, and the road district fund. And as of the end of November, property tax collections at the county were at 91% collected, which is good and very similar to previous years. You know, they put out the collections in November, and then people pay them, and we have a lot of mortgage companies that pay them. So we're about 93 to 95% usually. So 91% is right on track. That's good to see. The city greatly appreciates taxpayers and their contribution to our local community. There has been another revenue account added since last month to further provide clarification on the types of building department revenues. Account 100031 was added for building plan review. These revenues were previously going into the 100019 building permits line. And as the city explores the option of using the state's e-permitting software for building department, it will become more effective for reconciliation to have the revenue accounts more defined. So it's the same amount of revenue coming in. It's just that we're taking that revenue and breaking it out into the more appropriate revenue line items. So it's not a new revenue source, it's just a reclassification. There was also a new revenue account added in the road district, which is 500006 miscellaneous. Granted, it's only $20 in there, but it doesn't fit in any of the other line items. So I felt like we should probably increase, put a new line item in there because it's not any of the other ones. In expenditures, noteworthy changes are as follows. There was an expenditure in account 1051, City Hall maintenance, which was for the new City Hall doors that we purchased. A new account has been added in the building department, which was 101160. It's called mechanical inspector. We had previously been charging this to the building inspector. So again, it's just taking those revenues and sorting them out between building and mechanical. There were fire training expenses in 101252, professional development and school. And there was a payment to our municipal court judge in 101540, professional services. And there was also a payment in parks for our playground concrete that went up. The auditors have made their final adjustments, which insignificantly impact some of our beginning fund balances. And they will be sending the 2021-22 audit report, and they'll be in the January council meeting to do a little overview and if you have questions from them. And effective January 1st, the city, along with all other Oregon employers, will start withholding the employee contributions for the Paid Leave Oregon program, which is a new legislative program that allows employees to take paid time off for specific reasons. The current contribution rate will not be more than 1% of wages, and employees are required to pay 60% of that rate. Because the city of Gerhard is considered a small employer, we will not have to contribute at this time. Every day they release something new about this program, and they're writing and inventing right as we go. Our software currently hasn't been updated, but they're working on it, and the state is frantically working on being able to accept these contributions, and it will be very similar in terms of functionality as like unemployment, except it will be for paid leave. So people will apply for it and be able to have other opportunities. Employees will still have negotiated paid leaves independently. So there will be different types of leave banks, and that will be employers' responsibilities to work out.
Thank you. City Attorney, Peter.
All right, I'm unmuted. Some news, we got notice from Mitch Kogan that we can expect imminent litigation. And we've tendered that to our insurance carrier, CIS, since they generally handle municipal litigation. And it's related to claims of potential claims of defamation related to Jack Zimmerman and Beth Carpenter, I believe, is the other person that he's representing in this. So we've sent that to insurance, and I think they'll be handling it. That was separate from email that claimed that I had engaged in defamation and that I would hear from legal counsel soon related to the Zimmermans. I have not yet heard from legal counsel. I'd have to know what that looks like before I could discuss tendering that to insurance or what to do. So not a ton of detail on that. Just a request to preserve documents, which you guys know you need to do anyway. Anything relating to city business, the emails from city staff, of course, which city staff preserves those as well. But just be extra vigilant about preserving documents. That's what we always want to do, but particularly in the event of potential litigation. Other than that, I haven't had another US Bank Shannon Smith checking conference. I have one in January. My understanding though is that the lawyer for US Bank and Shannon Smith's lawyer are in settlement conversations. So hopefully those will be fruitful and the whole thing will be resolved. Other than that, happy to report that I've been advocating this for a long time, and I think some current and former members of the council have as well, that we be able to use census data to receive our state shared funds. We believe traditionally that Portland State University's population center has undercounted our population and our population growth. Those were borne out by the 2020 census numbers when they were released, which demonstrated that we had not been receiving and we're not alone. Virtually every city on the Northern Oregon coast had not been receiving the funds that they would have been entitled to because our populations have been badly undercounted. But now we get to use those census numbers. Those cities that were overcounted get to use Portland State's numbers. So I don't know exactly how that's fair and equitable. But the good news is we're going to be receiving more money than we would otherwise. So a step in the right direction. And I'm sure our treasurer will be happy to see that when those numbers start rolling in. And that's all I have, unless people have questions for me.
I have a question, Peter. Is this a retroactive, our population and the money that's due the city?
No, I believe it should be. And I've been pretty vocal about that. In fact, I worked with our current state senator, and she had a very talented intern working with her that tabulated a lot of data. But thus far, there's no indication that we will receive the money that we should have received over the 10-year period, nor that cities that received too much, the city of Portland being one of them, would need to repay those funds. So I think the good news is, at least looking forward, we'll be able to get more accurate, and we just need to monitor those numbers closely, because I've already heard from a couple of jurisdictions that apparently have lost population, but are getting record permits to build housing. So they don't think they've actually lost, but they've been told they have. So hopefully another possibility is a legislative fix. And I think that now that there's awareness to this issue, and it's an issue that I and a couple of other people have long believed was happening, but until we had this census data, we couldn't prove it. So we'll have to see what happens in the next legislative session, but hope springs eternal.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
And just to, Mr. Noble, if you can, this microphone is really sensitive, it picks up paper and conversational, so then we can't do it. Sorry, so just please. And just as a correction, it was, the letter was received through their attorney, but it was Mr. and Mrs. Zimmerman and Beth. Instead of Peter.
Okay, well, we're moving on to you for your report.
Okay, thank you. And then I believe the fire chief is available after.
Okay.
So speaking of software upgrades and what we've been working on, even though we are still working towards financial and utility billing, one of the other software upgrade projects that Ms. Angelina's been working on is with the Building Codes Division, going to an online building permit system. Angelina spent a lot of hours doing training, providing information, as well as the team in that. So that's coming along, and I'm not sure how much longer that project's going to take. Probably about.
We're estimating that we go live in February.
Okay, so hoping February we'll go live with that. That'll streamline a lot of the work that we do in our office and help with communication, and also help with communication to the builders as well. So we're looking forward to that. One update, I'm just going to go through a few things on my city administrator report. The Mansell Willow Tree update. Again, Ms. Mansell is very concerned that there's a tree growing, a willow tree growing into septic systems, creating problems. I talked a couple of times with the county. They've done what they can. They've gone through the routes that they can do with the ordinances and rules that they have, but they have really just closed the case at this point, and are not moving forward with anything. Ms. Mansell then asked if the city could then design some ordinances and become more restricted to be able to assist her in her plight. But we found that, you know, in doing so, that would add a whole nother, almost a whole nother department to the city working on septic issues. And we're pretty confident that the county is handling this as appropriately as we can. This may end up, if there is damage done to Ms. Mansell's property, it may end up to be a civil suit between the neighbors. We think that those give the avenues through it, and we wouldn't recommend making any changes to our ordinance this on. If the council wants to reconsider that, please let us know. But otherwise, that's kind of where we stand at the moment. Staff and administration, we got the new doors in, of course. The security cameras have been installed. We just need to get them configured. So that's working out well. Also under staff and administration, there's the park benches conversation. And as you see in the letters that were received in here, we have people, and Christy can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we have over 20, a list of 20 people that are interested in having some sort of memorial bench or some other structure around town to honor their family members or even a pet. The city has taken the approach that currently we're not doing any more benches other than what were already allocated by the city years ago for the benches that are out on the beach. But we do have opportunities for future parks. We have opportunities for trailheads and some other things, but the city doesn't have a policy or a plan. So we would recommend to staff in a future work session that we hash some of this out so that we can begin providing these people that have been waiting for a long time some answers as to what might be possible for them. And that will also help us in working out a plan for park development as well. So we'll put that on the list if that's all right with council, and we'll find an appropriate time to have that work session. Okay. Playground, as frustrating as that project has been, it is very slowly coming around. We have a commitment now that we've been through some major projects elsewhere in the town from the Public Works Department, and they have continued the construction. They're putting together some of the parts in the shop that are over there, making sure we have correct fitment, and then moving it over into the park. So we are committed to getting that done. I don't have a timeline of exactly when that's going to happen because it depends on the day-to-day operations of the city. We have in the roads and out department 3 gentlemen that are working in the public works, and it's been a struggle, but they're moving forward. The Other things I wanted to bring up is we have an upcoming work session, potentially January 31st. So make sure that you have that on your agenda, unless you would like to reschedule that, because that is New Year's Eve. And-
January 31st.
Oh, excuse me, that's not New Year's Eve, that's the one that's when I'll be celebrating New Year's Eve. I'll invite you to the party. Forget all of that, but we also have some policy changes that the mayor has recommended that we make. And we also would like to bring that to a work session. And that would be a policy change in regard to the way that we handle business licenses. And a policy change in the way that we handle liquor license. So those are things that the staff is also very interested in, so we'll be bringing those to you soon. Potentially January 31st. At this time, that's all that I have, and I believe we have Chief Como online and available.
I am, Miss Christie, if I'm able to share my screen. Oh, you're on top of it. All righty, hopefully everybody can see that and hear me all right. From a report from my data from last month, for November 2022, we had 62 total calls for service. And that breakdown looks like, as you can see, 31 calls was inside city limits, 21 was inside our district. We sent out auto and mutual aid 10 times, and that breaks down as follows. 6 times went to Seaside, 3 of them was for structure fires. Once was for a second alarm wildland fire. Many of you remember the second alarm wildland fire we had in the middle of summer, right on Little Beach, with auto mutual aid agreements. Typically, we end up returning the favor at some point, and we did last month with wildland fire that was on Tillamook Head. The other 2 calls for Seaside was a rope rescue and a fire alarm. We went to Warrenton twice, once for a structure fire, once for a motor vehicle accident. And then LC and Napa 1 time each for structure fires. We received aid twice last month. 1 was for extra manpower needed, and 1 was just for specialty apparatus that we did not have. What that looks like compared to previous years, November of 2021, we had 41 calls. So we had obviously significantly more this year. November of 2021, we ended on call 614. November of this year, we ended on call 659. So we are at the end of last month, we were 45 calls ahead of last year's record number of calls. And if there are no questions for me, that is the end of the report that I have prepared.
Any questions? Thank you, Chief.
Anytime, thank you guys.
Okay, now on to visitors, and the Seaside High School Future Business Leaders of America are our first visitors. Rita, would you
Introduce them.
Thank you.
I had the pleasure of going to the high school and meeting with the Future Leaders of America. I met with Leah Bowles, Lauren Meyer, and Sarah Brown, and Leah and Sarah are here tonight to give the presentation.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
We'll get set up. We have a presentation for you guys that we joined on Zoom, and I think we're just waiting to share our screen and get our presentation up on that.
You ladies should be all set.
Thank you. This is our advisor.
Just a flat.
This should be. Can you put me out for a second, actually? I'm just sharing the slideshow, but I don't know.
Medical specialist here.
You do it on Zoom.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're sharing our screen through Zoom right now.
It'll just be desktop one, and then we're sharing.
You've got time. Work on
Thank you.
meant to ask Chief this maybe before we got off, but do you know if the timber companies reimbursed?
We had to leave the meeting really fast and then we're rejoining this.
The timber companies for calls to Albert.
Unless there is malice or something like that, where somebody's held accountable. And then there is a some sort of restitution for that, we may be involved in that. Otherwise, it's a service that we provide for them as well, and they reciprocate.
Ah, there you are.
Oh, there you went.
What a fabulous moment that was.
We're close.
Okay.
Okay.
Yay.
Woohoo.
Okay.
It's just loading. All right, so we can get started. So my name is Leah Bowles.
And I'm Sarah Brown. So we are here, as you know, representing Seaside High School's Future Business Leaders of America program.
May I make a suggestion for your presentation? Go back and don't go to full screen, and then we can just watch it in the draft format.
That works.
There we go.
Perfect. Okay, so we are here representing FBLA from Seaside High School. Over the last year, we partnered with our school's Woods program to build 10 book nooks, is what we call them, but they're children-oriented book sharing boxes.
Along with that, we hosted a book drive at our school and at the public library in Seaside, which we collected over 1,000 children's books to fill our book nooks.
So we've already planted 2 of our boxes. One of them is at the Pacific Ridge Elementary School, and then another one is at the Sunset Recreation Center and now preschool. We're also planning on placing one of our stand-up boxes, which was one that was donated by the Seaside Public Library, inside of the Seaside Middle School.
We also recently met with the Seaside Public Works Committee to discuss the possibility about planting 4 additional book nooks at public parks in Seaside. And now we're just waiting on the approval from the city of Seaside, which we should get the A-OK because the Public Works Committee approved it on December 12th. So
we believe the new park in Gearhart Centennial Park would be a perfect place for one of our book nooks. They're made with professional grade materials and paint, as well as weather resistant materials and paint. They also have slanted stainless steel roofs just to fend off the harsh weather here on the coast.
So the Woods program has built us custom 5-foot 4x4 posts that need to be set 2 feet in the ground. If 2 feet is too deep, because I know that there's sometimes some conflict with gas and plumbing and stuff in the ground, we can cut them shorter. So
we propose that the boxes be planted closer to the ground, obviously, just so that little kids can have easier access to them. And prefer that they would be set in concrete just for further protection from the wind, which is pretty strong here.
So FBLA would take on the responsibility of making sure the book nooks are kept in the best shape possible.
So in one single book drive, we were able to collect, as Leah said, over 1,000 children's books. We have a large pile of books to replenish the boxes throughout the coming years, even after we graduate. Once we complete our collection, FBLA would easily run another book drive just to gain more.
Yeah, along with that, we also have a large amount of paint left over from when we originally created the book nooks. So we have some extra paint to touch up if something goes wrong. Our FBLA chapter also has over 50 members, so we have a large team to help maintain these book nooks.
Our plan is to assign our chapter members to check in on the boxes each month, just to make sure they're in good shape, as well as just to keep refilling them for the children. Using advice given to us from the Seaside Parks Committee, as we earlier mentioned, we created and advertised an email address that goes to the Seaside FBLA chapter to report any damages or vandalism that's done to the boxes, and we placed it on the boxes that we have existing already, and so far it's been successful.
Yeah, so our book nooks are also designed to be self-sustaining. When children leave a book, when children take a book, they're encouraged to leave one if they're able to.
We have a poster on the front of the existing boxes that explains our project and encourages people to leave books they no longer need in the box as well.
We understand that this is a large request and we appreciate you taking the time to listen to us. So do you guys have any questions?
No, I have a comment, though I did ask you before if you would not only have children's books, but young adult books, and you said you would, so that was nice, because we have a large young adult.
Yeah, we did get a large variety of books, varying from, preschoolers to young adults, and we've just been working on sorting them out to make sure there's a nice variety in each box.
And you also indicated that you might need the help of Public Works to dig the hole and put them in, and I don't know, if Chad, would that be possible?
Certainly would.
Okay, there's your answer.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So how large is the actual library structure?
I have the dimensions somewhere.
I think I have them in my notes.
I think they're in the chat too. I'm gonna stop sharing here.
Let me check. I wrote them down. I measured it.
We do have them in our, our Google Drive. I'm just gonna.
So they're 20 inches wide and 14 inches long. I don't know exactly how tall the actual book nook is. I'd say they're pretty big. Rita, you saw them.
Yeah, I did. They were nice. I liked them a lot.
So a suggestion is this, being a builder, is that these are going to be on 4x4 posts. I suggest that maybe you might want to put them in the ground a little bit more than 2 feet because of our weather.
Okay.
And rather than concrete, I would pack them with 3/4 minus gravel.
Okay.
Because that way we get a lot of rain here.
Yeah.
So because what happens when you put it, even if it's pressure treated or whatever it is, if you put concrete around a pressure treated post, the acid in the concrete eats the post away, okay, and then it breaks off there.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, but if you have it in gravel, then the water just filters on down through, and it doesn't rot.
Awesome.
So that's just a suggestion.
And then I think I did forget to mention, but we also have 2 supporting legs on the bottom of each post. Just to give it.
No, we don't. No. That was just for the display.
Ignore me then.
Is the role for children to
Yeah.
be able to take a
Well,
book
Public Works
and
will
that, or just take it home and keep it?
It's either or. It's okay.
Just whatever their need are. I mean, our goal is to create easy access to children's literature for children who don't have access. So if they can only take a book, that's okay, and we can fill them back up ourselves.
When you replenish them, we have a city blog that a lot of folks around here have access to, and they get notices on there. So it would be good for you to work with the city whenever you replenish it to make sure that it's advertised.
Okay, awesome. I think I just have like one question. So in terms of like when we actually get this box in the ground, is there someone I should be in contact with, like who can help us set the post and?
And that's right.
You might dig the hole.
Yeah, I know how to start. I got a couple questions for you. What's your timeline to get this project done?
We compete at our FBLA like state conference in April, and then we have to write a 15-page report on our project, which is due a little bit earlier than April, I think. End of January, December, I don't know. And we've got some time. It's probably longer than January till our report's due.
If it's not in the ground yet, we can still write about how it's in the process. So
yeah.
Okay, we might be able to help you with that report writing, because I might have another step that we might have to take through this. In the Earhart zone code, any use inside of a park is actually a conditional use. So anything that we want to put in there needs to go through the planning commission to be able to make sure that it's aligning with our plans, which I'm sure something like this would be, because this is an excellent spot near where kids eventually will be. And having books available, I think, is really neat. The options would be, if we wanted to keep it in the park, we would have to go through the conditional use process. And I think with the help of these young ladies, the city would be the applicant and help them work through this process with us as part of the event. The other option is to go to potentially the Trails and Arts Center and ask them if they would like to put that on their property as well. It's nearby the park, outside the park zone. Or the third option would be potentially to put it near City Hall as well, depending on what your timeline would be. So there's just a little bit of work that we might need to do with that, but depending on those options.
What about off the sidewalk on the west side of the fire hall?
Yeah, we could do that.
Yes.
The only zone is park zone that requires the conditional use process. But we did go through that. We're fairly efficient with those, and this isn't a big project, so it would add a little bit of time to the town, but we should be able to get it done before they go to competition.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing about putting it on the west side of the fire station, by the sidewalk, would be the fact that the doors would be facing south. And so it might, you might get some sort of, water infiltration.
And I think your goal is to bring it to the attention of the kids playing on the playground, you want it
Around to
close
the
by
north side.
without crossing the street, so I like the option of the park, which would also be a learning experience for you, future leaders, or if you were to ask the art center, you could maybe get a wind buffer by tucking it in close to the north side of that building a little bit.
I agree. I think this would be really neat at the park. And if you're willing to go through that process, we would help you every step of the way. It shouldn't take much of your time, other than another meeting, maybe an hour or two, just helping us put the report together.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's definitely something.
Just a procedure that we need to get through.
No.
And just think of the competition when you write, oh, yes, we got a conditional use.
You're just giving us more than just that, so.
So if you two are amenable to that, you would work with Miss Angelina.
Alright.
We tease that process starts.
So can we have a motion
I'll give you a motion.
to move forward with this?
I'll give you a motion.
And pick your spot, and then we'll right from there.
I'll give you a motion.
Okay,
Do you want me to tell you what spot I want, or?
no, just give us a motion to go ahead with this project and we'll,
Every time I give you a motion. Please, take my motion.
I need a second. Okay,
What was your motion? You said a motion.
She had a motion to move forward with the project.
Move forward with
To move
this
forward
project
on the project
without a location.
without a location.
I would like to amend that motion. Is that how you do it?
Yeah.
I would like to move forward with the project for the book nook to be near the children's playground in Centennial Park.
you amend?
I agree.
Okay, can I get a second?
I'll say.
Any discussion? Favors? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Sounds like it's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
one other question I have is, can we donate the gravel to go around the post? I know there's just.
I'll have
a
to
little
check
bit
with
out
the
there.
treasurer.
Okay.
Yes, sir. I'm sure we can do that.
You should not buy out.
Yes.
It'll be a fun project.
Okay, thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Girl.
You want an email address as well? Your email address first.
Yeah.
Just in case one is specific. They were together than I was. That's for sure.
Yeah, that would be the same kind of scenario that if we were doing, placing of benches in parks. We would go through the same process.
Thank you so much. Thank
So-
you. Thank you. I appreciate all the support.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Our pleasure.
Yay.
Next up on visitors, Wally.
I'm Wally Hamer. I live at 312 Spruce Street in Gerhart. And I want to thank the city, the council people. Some folks weren't here. 3 years this spring, we started pickleball, 2 courts at the tennis courts. And we just thank you. There's a lot of people that have played there and have enjoyed it. And so we thank you for that. I'm coming before you today. Did they allocate a proposal, John or Tim?
No, I think that Let me grab this real quick.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, so what I put in the synopsis was the council has worked with you on past pickleball matters from implementing the courts to replacing the nets and been a liaison between the city and the residents to help pickleball running smoothly within the community. Attached is correspondence from Wally and the council. You'll be present to discuss the details, but essentially you're looking for permission to move forward so we can begin writing grants.
Yes, so I'm coming before you guys, just to see, I don't know what the process is exactly, if you guys say, yeah, let's look at the grants. The reason why I talk about the grant is because in January, the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department in Oregon accepts the grants. And I was just thinking, let's get on it, so the city doesn't have to put out any money. And previously what happened is the city matched, we had a gal that taught school at Seaside High School that passed away, and she donated quite a bit of money to do not the resurfacing, but the painting and buying the nets. So we just matched, the city matched what she gave, and there's still money there. But the way the Oregon Parks and Rec Department does it, they have a grant from 0 to 75,000, and then 75,000 to 150,000. So we just need to kind of collaborate and figure out what we want. Chad and I met with a guy named Alex Havens. He's the guy that put the tennis courts in. How long ago was that, Chad? By chance, do you know?
About 11 years ago.
Okay, so that the resurfacing of that was 11 years ago.
10 years, yeah.
Okay.
It took about a year to construct.
Yeah, and then a few of the council members met me down there. We kind of walked the tennis court. That the tennis court really does need to be resurfaced, and that's not me. I'm not a professional, but Alex is, who put it down. There's a bunch of holes in the surface, and what happens is moisture gets under that and it just wreaks havoc on it. And that's happening. There's a lot of holes on the surface right now. So we were just thinking, if we did the resurfacing, then maybe we could put lines on it. The proposal that I'm coming to you for is we'd like to put 2 more courts down for a total of 4 courts. And the way a lot of communities do this is they just use 1 tennis court. Our goal as pickleball players is not to interfere with tennis. So it's going to be 1 tennis court, and then we have 4 pickleball courts. The lines for tennis will also go down there, but we'd have 4 lines for pickleball courts. And the reason why is once you build it, they will come. And during the summertime, I don't know if you guys have ever driven by, but there's loads of people, and the majority of the people are locals. And what I mean by locals are Seaside, Deerheart, Cannon Beach folks. And that's just the way it goes. I mean, the tennis players, there's a group of tennis guys, gals that have played there for years. They're from all over the county too. But these are the best courts. That's why people love playing here, because they're really good courts. And so I'm just coming before you to see if we can maybe start thinking about doing a grant. So the money, anything doesn't come to you guys, maybe we could work it out so we could get some money from the state of Oregon to do it. And I'll guarantee you, I mean, there's been times I've showed up and there's been 30 people for 2 courts. That's 8 people can play at a time. And so you got 22 people sitting out waiting to play. You know, I mean, it's okay. It works out, but it gets old. People leave, you know, so if we could add that, you know, those other 2 courts, it'd be awesome, you know, to do something like that. Why pickleball? Well, I'm an old fart, excuse my language. I can't play tennis anymore very well. So I prefer pickleball. It's a very highly social game because your partner's about right there. And it's just really fun. It's really interactive. And my feet hurt, but I feel like my heart rate has come down a bit since I've been playing. You know, you talk to all the people, that's the way they feel about it. You know, they get an opportunity to work out, recreation, socialize. It's really, really good for people. So, you know, if we could carry this on, it'd be awesome. And I've talked to Christy, showed her the link to the Oregon Parks and Rec Department. She probably already knew anyway, but I talked to her about it. So she's filled in, I guess she's an outstanding grant writer. and stuff. So, any questions, you guys, about it?
Do you have an estimate of the cost?
Don't, because well, Alex did a bid and it was for $24,000. And that's adding the course, resurfacing everything, adding the lines, and then probably figuring out some kind of fencing. But that grant's 0 to 75, so I you know, maybe we could figure out some other use for that money somewhere. You know, not just for pickleball, it could be used maybe for something else. I don't know if that's what to get the grant, if that's would work out, but maybe we could, you know, do other things with the money too, because I don't think we need necessarily $75,000 for pickleball.
Well, one of the things that was the reason behind the Parks Master Plan was for us to have the opportunity to apply for some of these grants that are coming up to the state and federal government. So there's identified items in that plan as well as, you know, what quality was that we add in there.
Yeah, it's great. I don't know if anybody head down to Nehalem, the little town of Nehalem. They used Oregon Parks and Rec. They got a grant from them. They've got 6 beautiful courts down there for that little community. And I played down there a couple times. They're really nice. They've got it fenced off. It's really, really nice. But my opinion, these courts are the best. They're great. So.
Any other questions for Wally?
Yeah, so you said for the fence, or is that a fence to separate?
Yeah, just so what happens, tennis the same way. You hit a ball, it goes into the other court. Who cares? We don't normally worry about that. But it just would help a little bit if we had something to break that up a little bit. And, you know, I've heard so many things about, well, you know, tennis players don't like pickleball. Pickleball players don't. We're not that way in this community. We are totally supportive of tennis. The pickleball players are totally, and that's why I don't want to touch one of those courts. So if people come in, they can play their tennis, you know. And summertime, there's many, many, many more pickleball players than there are tennis players that use that court. You know, and Gerhardt, you know, it's a second hometown, and it's still that way. And there's a lot of usage for pickleball.
And the 24,000 you're talking about, that's resurfacing and painting.
Yeah.
New stripes.
Yeah, and of course, I don't know what Alex would say today, because that was done last spring. We met with him last spring and asked him to do a bid for us, so he did a bid.
You should probably tell them. No.
Yeah, it's probably a little bit more than that, I'm sure.
What about tournaments? Or is
We don't do any tournaments here.
Okay.
We haven't done any of that. There is a tournament Broadway now. Most tournaments are across the river in Long Beach.
Okay. Is there, and I don't know how you sign up for it down there. I live down the street, but I see people out there. Is there a way that we could ensure that there's a preference for Gerhardt folks that wanted to use it? You know, first come.
Oh, you mean for pickleball? For
anything, yeah, for the, to make sure that our courts remain. Is there any way to do that?
I'm sure, yeah. Usually if you go, like, one time, my wife, we traveled to Palm Springs and just before COVID hit, and the way they do, they have all kinds of parks. You just put your name up, and that's how you get into the next. And they have like 24 pickleball courts.
Okay.
They have about eight parks that have that many courts, because there's so many.
Right.
Pickleball's the craze in our country.
Right.
As far as that, but yeah, that's a good, you know, that's something I think needs to be talked about.
Well, I mean, I don't want to cause fist fights down there or
There won't.
anybody saying, you know, I'm gonna jump you.
It's never happened.
Okay.
And I don't think it would ever happen,
Okay.
but
It gets worked out in the court.
Yeah.
All that keeps them under control.
All right, well, thank you very much. Really appreciate your support, you guys.
Mr. Mayor, may I just a couple of things. So what the city's looking for, and Christie also had some things to say, but what the city's looking for is the permission to go forward with the grant writing process, to come up with a solution for 4 courts, and then the 1 court be resurfaced and to be relined. We'll figure out that price, we'll write the grant, and then if we are successful with the grant, we'll have more conversations after that about how we're going to set that up. But the city's looking for direction on whether or not we should apply for this grant or not.
Well, I think, I would advocate applying for a grant, but most grantors would like to see some seed money up front. They don't want to just fund the whole thing. It really helps if you have seed money. So would the city of Gerhart be putting up any initial seed money?
I don't know if there's any in kind, but Miss Christie, if you're
Yes.
online, you had something that you wanted to add?
I just wanted to provide some details on the timeline. It's, I talked to Mark Cowan, who worked with us on our Parks Master Plan grant from Oregon Parks and Rec Departments. And the grant that they're referring to is through them. It's the local government grant program. Yes, the cycle opens January 1st, but most of that is just grant workshops, webinars, that kind of thing. We are considered small city, so the small city grant applications are not due until May 1st. So we have time, is what I really wanted to let everyone know.
Okay. I think Wally ran away on us. Can you let him know also?
He's standing here with me.
Okay.
So I suppose one thing that we could do then with that timeline is that we can work with Wally and come up with a proposal and show on a piece of paper what it is that he's thinking about. And then so that you have an opportunity to see that. And then if you decide that's something that you'd like to go forward with, then I think that gives us enough time to submit the grant.
I'd also say if there's opportunity to do like a multi, if it's not just the pickleball courts, if there's more funding, like if it's 75,000, like Wally was saying, and there's other priorities that we have in that plan that we might want to include, and we can include, we might want to bring those to the table as well.
Correct. And there might be an in-kind requirement, being that the city would provide some money. A lot of times through state grants and things like that, that's not a requirement, especially for recreation items. But if it is, sometimes we can use staff time to pay that in kind. And if not, we do have some funds still aside from what the group had raised that we could potentially use for that in kind as well. So you can work with Mr. Wally, kind of put together that proposal and then come back to you.
Well, there's a local association, correct?
What's that?
There's a local association.
Pickleball, yeah, it's called North Coast
Yeah.
Pickleball Association, yeah.
Yeah, so they could provide some match funding or fundraiser or something like that.
We're pretty primed for grants. Getting that park master plan done was a big deal. And now that we have that done, the grants should be a little easier for us to see.
So you don't need something like a consensus, go ahead, move forward, and then we'll look at a plan and give you the okay for the plan?
Sure, if you'd like us to go forward and work with Wally to put together a plan and then come back to you, we can do that. Does that sound good?
Consensus, anyone? Yay?
Yay.
Yay? Sounds good.
We'll work that soon and then we'll try to come back next month.
All right. Thank you.
No, thank you. Always good to get people out moving.
Yeah.
Right, now we're at public communications, written and oral. I have anyone wishing to address the city council concerning items of interest not on the agenda may do so at this time. All remarks will be limited to 5 minutes per person. Requests to comment electronically must be submitted by email to the city recorder at info@cityofgerhart.com no later than 4 p.m. the day of the meeting. In-person attendees wishing to speak are required to sign in prior to the meeting. I don't have a list.
There was nobody signed up as of the meeting started, but maybe we had a couple of people come in.
The clipboard is still empty.
I didn't understand.
Empty, no
Empty.
list.
All right,
Nobody's-
well, if that's the case. The ordinance and resolutions, and we have none. We go to old business, and we have none. We go to new business. And we have planning commission appointments.
Mayor, would you like me to go through the synopsis, or would you like to?
No, I want you to go through the synopsis.
Sir. So new business, planning commission appointments, 2 planning commission seats are up for appointment. Terms for both President Jim Gideon and Commissioner Judy Schechter expire at the end of November 2022. Both commissioners are seeking reappointment. The city also received applications from Kathy Brooks, Beth Cameron, Chris Luck, and Richard Senders. At the mayor's request, all candidates were notified in advance of his intention to recommend reappointment of the commissioners Gideon and Schechter. Therefore, interviews were canceled. To appoint, the mayor shall nominate an applicant. The city council shall confirm the nominee by majority vote, and the city council, if you fail to confirm an applicant, the mayor shall nominate another applicant. Terms of office for a member shall be 4 years, with terms expiring on November 30th of the 4th year after appointment in accordance with the position that is being filled.
Is it necessary for me to name both commissioners independently, or can I say, I'd like to recommend reappointment of Commissioner Gideon and Schechter?
I think you can do it at once if you'd like to do that.
I have done that. So. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it would be, make a recommendation, and then, yes, the city council would just vote on that.
I made a recommendation, they have voted by thumb and
did
by
I?
voice.
I
I
didn't see
think
the thumb, sorry, sir.
Justine needs a verbal.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lost my page. Oh, zone change amendment.
So at this point, Mr. Mayor, we've already discussed these sorts of things. Your options are move to continue the hearing to the next meeting, or move to deny the zone map amendment based on the new findings to support denial, or move to approve the zone map amendment subject to the recommended conditions of approval, and direct staff to prepare an ordinance for adoption at the next city council meeting. Based on the zone change approval criteria, the planning commission recommends the city council approve the zone map amendment R1 to R3 under the following conditions, under the conditions that are listed. There's also the opportunity for the council to do other conditions as well.
Hey, is there any discussion, or does someone want to add a condition, or does someone make a motion? All 3 of those are up in the air. I'm getting nothing.
Well, I want to make a motion, but I want conditions. And I want to add a condition.
Okay, you want to add a condition? Would you like to tell the council that, and we can discuss it?
Right, well, I think that Paulina did have a good point, and it sounds like the applicant wasn't opposed to creating a deed restriction that would prevent future owners from being able to take advantage of the other things that come along with being in an R3, being able to run a canteen. He has no intention of doing it, but somebody down the road might, so I think that that needs to be in the deed restriction also. So that would be my first.
I had a question about deed restrictions. Did they have to show that deed restriction prior to the zoning change?
Okay, so
They do that.
Peter, you caught that question.
I had a little bit of trouble hearing. Was it that so if the applicant agrees to that deed restriction as a condition, then we don't really have to worry about, then we could, if we're all in agreement, we can impose it. So I guess it's a question for the applicant in some respects. If the applicant doesn't agree to the condition, then we can discuss options.
My question, Peter, was, does the applicant have to make that deed restriction ahead of the ordinance, of us approving the ordinance? And if so, who writes that language in the deed restriction and make sure it's in compliance with what we're trying to do here?
So we would provide that as a condition, and then in order to be able to utilize the new zoning, the applicant would have to provide us with evidence that they had done that restriction.
But not prior to approving it necessarily, because
No, that could, because keep in mind, until you approve the zone change, the zoning is R1 where cocktail lounge wouldn't be allowed anyway. And so this would be subject to certain conditions. They would need to be able to demonstrate that they had met those conditions. And once they did that, then at that point, the zone change could move forward.
And would you provide the language of what that deed restriction would say?
I think that the easiest way to do it would be to restrict the use to housing. So housing allowed in the R3 zone. And that way we don't have to anticipate if there were other code changes in the R3 zone going forward. It would be clear that these parcels could only be used for housing allowed in the R3 zone.
Okay, and that would still, under that umbrella, that would still prevent the vacation rentals from, no? So that would have to be.
My understanding is that the STR prohibition is already a condition for this parcel.
Okay.
So that would be in addition to the housing. So long-term housing, so housing not short-term, which means that the lease would have to be 30 days or more. That would be the requirement, and the property could only be used for housing. So it couldn't be used as like a motel or other STR. It would be long-term rental housing, which would make this more palatable, frankly, to state agencies, because I think they're acutely aware of our long-term housing problems and the impact of STRs. So I think we could impose those conditions if the applicant is willing to do so.
Okay, and then my other issue was, to be clear, it's a recommendation that he combine the two lots. Should that be a requirement? Is recommendation too permissive? We would, okay, then my questions are answered.
So you'd like that as a condition?
Yes, they say it's already one, but I.
What's number 4?
Right, so no, that was already included, but the one I
Yeah, the
wanted.
combination, but I'm talking about the other one is restricting it to residential use only.
Right, that was the addition. That was,
Right,
I made the
okay.
motion for that with the addition. So that we take it with the.
So I would suggest 2 conditions. One, that it would be housing, restricted to housing in the R3 zone. And then the next condition would be that the properties cannot be offered or rented as short-term rentals.
And so, yeah, and there's 4 conditions there now. I'll go over those really quickly here. Number 1 would be the maximum site density shall not exceed 30 dwelling units. Number 2 is tourist accommodations or short-term rentals are prohibited, recommended as deed restrictions. Number 3 is the commission decided that rather require construction of the TSP plan now that we would get a waiver of remonstrance. Number 4 is prior construction. We would bring the 2 parcels together, or they would. And then the 5th, in my would be restricting to residential or housing use only in the R3 zone.
But Chad, number 4 is, I mean, like, Nelson pointed out, prior to construction of any new units, it is recommended that the two parcels be consolidated.
We have that as a requirement, so.
Oh, you do that?
What we do, yeah, for building
Oh, okay, so
purposes, so we will accommodate that, but we could change that if you'd like to requirement as well, if you'd like to do that as well.
And we might as well.
Might as well, yeah,
Everyone's happy.
I want it to be one.
yeah. Yeah.
It will help me with my financing.
Is there any other changes or discussion that needs to go?
Okay, so to be clear, we're gonna add required number 4, replacing recommended, and then we will restrict the residential use only.
so that's number 5.
Yes, sir.
Are you addressing the long term? Like period?
It's already in here.
No short-term rentals. Okay, well, is there any other discussion? I would entertain a motion with the 5 conditions.
I will give you a motion with the 5 conditions.
To accept it?
Accept it.
And to instruct the city staff to write the ordinance, because we're gonna have to come back next city council meeting with the ordinance, and then read it once, council meeting after that, read it once, and then 30 days later it becomes ordinance. So your recommendation would be that the staff
That the staff write the ordinance.
with the ordinance.
Okay, I'll set that.
So at the bottom of the page, you're we're voting on number 3. Right?
With additional. conditions.
Yes.
Okay.
With additional conditions.
Right. So move to approve the zone map amendment subject to the recommended conditions of approval and with the conditions that we just discussed, the residential only, and direct staff to prepare an ordinance for adoption at the next city council meeting. I make a motion for that.
I'll second.
Second. Motion and second. Is there any discussion necessary? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Unanimous. Passes. Next is the low income household water assistance program.
Is here.
Yeah, okay.
So the synopsis is the city was contacted by Katie May from Community Action Team seeking partnership on behalf of low-income families who need assistance with their water bill. The letter, the program brochure, and the agreement are attached in the organization partnership so they can speak. So the organization needs our partnership so they can speak to vendors, us, on the account holder's behalf. If we do not sign the agreement, no assistance will be available for qualified families within our jurisdiction. Staff recommends council motion consensus to enter into the vendor contract with Community Action Team in order to provide assistance to low-income families with water bills. Legal analysis, I can leave to Peter if needed, but financial analysis, there's no cost to the city. We would just be able to provide information to CATS.
Peter, do you have anything to say on this?
I reviewed this program in other jurisdictions, and what staff has said is correct. It'll allow the community action team in order to be able to provide some assistance to people and connect them to some state programs. And there's a lot there, but that I've reviewed, but and there's some reporting requirements for staff that they need to be aware of. But yeah, this is a program that's been adopted by a lot of jurisdictions around the state.
All right. Council motion for consensus to enter into the required vendor contract with Community Action Team in order to provide assistance to low-income families with water bills.
I move that we make a motion for consensus to enter into the required vendor contract with the Community Action Team in order to provide assistance to low-income families with water bills.
We have a motion. I need a second so we can have consensus.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you very much.
All right. Next on the agenda, funds request for water rate study.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. City staff is requesting water reserve funds for up to $20,000 to enter into an agreement with a third party who will study Gerhard water rates. City posted the attached RFP seeking qualified consultants to conduct a comprehensive water rate study. And per the RFP, the goal of the study is to independently assess and evaluate the city's existing water delivery cost structure and provide a new 10-year plan with rates and guidelines. The broad objective of the study is to adequately fund water and utility operations and infrastructure costs and promote conservation, while minimizing rates to the greatest degree possible. The study will include evaluating the current water rate structure and comparing benchmarks in the industry, as well as neighboring communities. The RFP closed November 21st, and we received one bid. Council options are to approve the request for up to $20,000, take another action or deny it. We do recommend that we move forward with this. Costs over the last 2 years, 3 years, really, but 2 years especially, have just multiplied. And we are definitely becoming in a place where we're no longer going to be able to provide money or revenues out of our out of the water revenue fund to go into a water reserve fund. And as a matter of fact, we're getting very close to not being able to meet our expenses if we don't look at this water rate situation very closely. So our recommendation is to move forward with that. If we had the $20,000, we could enter into the contract and then start that process. The contractor that did submit a bid, it was a very concise contract, and it will also leave us with other tools to continue the work in the future, to be able to monitor our program and to be able to assess rates even moving beyond the 10-year period of time is one of the services that they will provide. They were under $20,000, but just by barely for that project. Staff time is not included, of course, but that's just kind of built in.
So, yeah. I continue with the motion.
Wait, I have a question,
Okay.
if I may. So under the code content and deadline for submission, most of the dates are in 2023. So, but then at the very last page, you say that the selected firm will be notified of the contract on December 7th, 2022. So I guess my question is, how long is this RFP good for? Is it over and done?
Yeah.
So all the 2023 dates are.
Those are for the final report.
Those are for the deliverables, and they may be pushed forward by another month. But we're gonna have to work with the contractor on that and make adjustments, so there might need to be adjustment on that, but no, those are the dates for the deliverables.
Okay, that clears it up. Thank you.
I have a question. When's the last time, were the water rates set when the system went in and we've never increased the rates, or are we still working on the same thing?
2013.
That is correct. In 2013, we updated some of the rates that had to do with the connections and some slight rate changes at that point, and brought us to where we're at, which is $39 for 2 months worth of water. We have not done that since 2013 at all.
So in the whole time that the infrastructure is aging, is this what you're saying?
Yeah, so what we've been doing with our budgeting is bringing in the revenue from the water, paying the expenses, using the additional revenue that was left over and putting it forward into the reserve accounts that you and I talked about last week. So we're just getting into an area where we're not going to be able to provide that money moving forward because we're going to need to use it for expenses. So we're not able to put any money into a reserve account moving forward. That's why we're going to need to look at this rate study to continue that and to just take care of the expenses that have changed a lot in the last 8 years, 9 years since we did do that rate adjustment. We are one of the lowest cost water providers in the county, if not most of Oregon.
The state of Oregon, I have several water.
So we're We've been very efficient.
Portland, Clackamas County.
We've been very efficient. We've been able to operate, and we tried to honor what the voters did in providing us with this system, keeping the costs low as long as we can, as long as we can. But we're getting into a spot where we could end up in crisis if we don't make some changes.
So when this analysis, I mean, when this study goes on, the guy that's gonna be doing the study and everything like that, he's going to recommend what sort of rate increases on an incremental basis or whatever it is over the next 10 years or.
Yes, sir.
And there's no obligation. I mean, the council can decide which way to go. By doing a rate study, there's no obligation that you're increasing rates. All you want is gathering data to see if, from a professional water consultant, of whether or not they feel like what rates are appropriate and whether or not it's the right action to take. But it's the council's decision.
Right, but this also allows us to meet one of those benchmarks for the water management and conservation plan, which we are sorely lacking as far as meeting benchmarks.
It's gonna be helpful.
I mean, it just seems to me that if your costs are increasing and your rates are staying here, eventually, you're gonna go over the cliff.
And that's where we're getting to, sir. That's where we're getting.
But, yeah, so that's why we do this, so that we can figure out, we're not just making our best guess. This is an expert that's going to tell us exactly what we need to do.
They'll go through our business operations, look at the efficiencies, look at the inefficiencies, they'll look at the expenses, everything. This person's done this quite a bit, seemed to be very detail oriented. If the council receives that report and you decide to raise the rates based on what they were telling us, then city staff will bring an ordinance to the council for your approval. And that would go through the approval process, 2 meetings plus 30 days.
What do we need in order to approve this?
Motion. Votes.
I make a motion to approve this.
So second.
Any discussion now? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Against? I think so.
Thank you.
Okay. On to council's concerns, and I'd like to start off by saying this is December 7th, the day that lives in infamy. We need to remember to thank our vets, which ones are left from World War II, but also thank our other vets that you happen to know or you see. And that's all my concern. Peter.
I have no concerns.
Austin?
No concerns.
Newbie.
Okay, Moody, thank you. Dana?
One who talks too much, that's a no.
All right, a motion, please.
Motion adjourned.
Second?
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting closed.
Thank you. Mr. Devereaux, Mr. Wolf, just have